Well, up until now, we weren't exactly sure one of these existed. I always thought to myself, if we ever were going to find a case of this, that it would probably be buried somewhere up deep in Canada, and the owners probably didn't even know they had it. Turns out that's the exact story of this case. Families had it since probably the year of issue. They always thought it was a 1980 case. As far as hockey goes, we refer to hockey and basketball as 80-81. Mario Lemieux's rookie is 85-86. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson is 80-81. So when we see a Topps case, they use the first part of the slash year as 79. So if this was a 79 Topps hockey case, it would have -79 here in the corner. O-Pee-Chee, however, used the year after the slash, the 80, which is this part of the case. So the family, since they've had this for 40-some years, always assumed this was a 1980 case of hockey. Now, that's not so bad, 350,000. Until one day, someone finally asked them, you might want to check and see what's exactly in there. So they pulled back about an inch, and to their surprise, these are all white boxes. That's when they realized this was 79-80, which is correct from the story I mentioned about how O-Pee-Chee would label their cases. So, this went from 350,000 to pushing 3 million. Pretty nice surprise. And this was just recently discovered and found out exactly what was in it. O-Pee-Chee didn't use any tape, any staples like Topps did. Topps usually used a lot of staples on the bottom, never tape. However, O-Pee-Chee was always glued flaps, top and bottom. And I see nothing wrong with this case at all. It's unbelievable the shape it's in. I mean, usually anytime we see anything like this from this era, corners are smashed, mildew at times. If it was ever up against a concrete wall for 40 years, that concrete would seep mildew or water damage into the case. This is absolutely unbelievable. Like I said, this is probably the holy grail of any sport, 70 on up. I guess you would have to go to maybe like a tall boy hockey case. Something in the late 60s O-Pee-Chee hockey to match the value and the rarity of this item. Okay, so what we're going to do with this case is we're going to go in through the bottom and take a look at the 16 boxes that are in it. Make sure everything is good there. And then we're going to wrap each one of the boxes, all 16, as from a sealed case. Each box will receive its own letter, photo matching each letter with its particular box. So, let's take a look at what's inside. Like I said, O-Pee-Chee only used glue on these. No tape, no staples, just strictly glue. No mildew, no smell, no water. Looks like it was kept in a very good environment. A lot of times, like I said, up against a concrete wall or buried in the basement, it'll get some mildew, some damage. Okay, another thing we check for when we do these cases is always trying to see if there's a second set of glue that anybody has applied to the case. Sometimes when people reseal cases, we'll be able to see where there's an extra layer of glue over the original case. This one's flawless. Sometimes you'll see an extra set of paper that's peeled away from the case that shouldn't be there because it was glued a second time. But this one perfectly matches up with all the cardboard tearing through here on each flat. You can see it's just a perfect replica. This part here, this part here, this part here, this part here. It's just, you know, untouched. You can even see over here, it's still attached where the glue was. Cool. And as fresh as they come. Tape still intact, perfectly intact.
And
this was put here by O-Pee-Chee. It's aged. It's not even brittle. Usually these things are so brittle they come off in shipping. If somebody ships us a box and say, hey, this is going to be tape intact, by the time it's gotten here, it's broke off because it's so brittle. These boxes are absolutely flawless. This one, like I said, tape is snapped. But that's just from it being so brittle.
Okay.
This one, tape is still intact. And the fact that, like I said, most of these I assume are going to be tape intact. This one just popped because of age and shifting. We're going to mark all the boxes from a sealed case. We don't put double descriptions of tape intact and from a sealed case, because from a sealed case trumps all. You know, that is the only perfect answer would be to call them from a sealed case. Here's one that's barely hanging on by a thread. Just the best boxes I've ever seen. That one's completely intact. Another one completely intact. I think the most I've ever seen of these at one time was 4 boxes somebody sold us decades ago. Now we're lucky if we see one at a time, and never in this condition. And of course, you know, failed to mention so far who's in this that makes it what it is. And this is the rookie card of the great one, Wayne Gretzky. And between the tops and the O-Pee-Chee version, the O-Pee-Chee version is much, much more demand and value than the tops. But these are the whitest boxes. I don't think I've ever seen a display box this clean.
Are you splitting them up between the ones that are taped and the ones that are the
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. This one, as you can see, just brittle. It's a little bit more yellow than some of the other ones, and you can see it's just brittled off. Obviously, lid's never been opened on any of these, except maybe the day the women put them in the case. And this one, I'll go back to this one. This one was barely hanging on.
Okay.
So, but we could still put that in that stack. Now here's the last row. Sometimes if you're going to have any condition issues, it could be in the last row, depending if something was stacked on top of it. Tape intact. Still tape intact. This one, as you can see, is barely brittled away, but just from age, that's going to happen on a couple. And the last one, tape still intact. So we have a total of what looks like 13 boxes, still with the tape intact. 3 where it has just barely popped from being brittle. Awesome. My guess would be 2.5 pushing 3 million for the value of the case. And what we're going to do, like I said originally, is we're going to wrap each box individually, label it as from a sealed case, then put all 16 back in the case, and wrap the case as one big item.